to Let's Talk with Tara, the space where real life meets real answers. I am Dr. Tara T. Stallings, counselor and coach, here to help you navigate life's toughest challenges. Together, we'll explore psychological insights, emotional healing, relational growth, and biblical truths to empower your journey. So grab a seat, lean in, and let's have the conversations that matter the most. What you don't understand is keeping you hostage. What you don't understand is keeping you hostage. I'm Dr. Tara T. Stallings. Today we're going to be talking about what are those unseen shackles that are keeping you hostage. What are shackles? Let's talk about what are shackles. Shackles are chains that keep you bound. Physically, they're physical things that keep you bound, but we're talking about those emotional shackles, those behavioral shackles, those mindset, psychological shackles that keep you a hostage to the life and lifestyle and the person that you really want to be in life. And the thing about shackles, those unseen shackles, most people walk around with shackles on their minds, and they don't know that they are a hostage. They keep wanting to progress, but they don't know how to progress or how to change because they don't recognize or they have not identified that they have unseen shackles that are keeping them in a conundrum, in a cycle that's preventing them from being the person that they want to be, from living the life and lifestyle that they want to achieve in life. Talk about it. Shackles are the limits put on your freedom. I want you to think about this, and happiness, emotionally and physically. They are the limits that are put on your freedom and happiness, both emotionally and physically, but also spiritually. And I want to start with family generational shackles or cycles and these are patterns that have been passed down from one generation to the next generation. And you see it in the family members, the mindsets, the behaviors, the beliefs that keep a family in a cycle or bound in shackles. And you see everybody repeating the same cycle. No matter how educated they get, they can go back to the same cycles, that shackles, that generational shackle has them bound, and it keeps them or living out freedom and to do what they really want to do. So let's talk about it today. Let's talk about those unhealthy beliefs and values. And what does that look like? Because when I teach, when I talk, I want you to get a good picture of the words that I speak, but what it looks like. Let me give you an example of unhealthy beliefs and values. The families can teach that emotions like sadness and fear should be suppressed. And when they are taught that, what happens to the individuals, they create a cycle of emotional disconnect where they grow up not being able to process and express their feelings in a healthy manner. You see it in your families. You see it where people, they won't talk, they don't talk, they suppress, they internalize how they feel until they get mad, and then they explode, and what they're trying to say comes out in anger. Or they don't say anything at all, and they give you the silent treatment. And what happens, the impact on the person and the generation is this. that they struggle with unresolved emotional pain, leading to depression, anxiety, and strained relationships. Do you see that in your family? Do you see that in your family? A poverty mindset, generational shackles that are passed down is a poverty mindset where they believe that they're not meant to be wealthy. I hear this all the time. Life is a constant struggle. If God, I'm where God wants me to be. No, that is not true. That is not true. And what the impact it leaves on a generation, on a family, is that they grow up avoiding financial risk and opportunities, perpetuating cycles of financial instability. Perpetuating cycles of financial instability. They try to hold on to everything. They don't take risks. They try to work their way out of poverty. And you cannot work your way out of poverty. You cannot. You cannot, because guess what? The more you have, the less you'll hold on to. I see it all the time. Because it's like what happens is you have money, but you have holes in your pocket because of the poverty mindset. What about addictions? Let's talk about these things. Let's talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, we don't identify it, it keeps us bound. Addiction, alcohol, substance abuse, overeating, gambling, any type of addiction, spending money. Yeah, that's an addiction. The person grows up witnessing these behaviors as normal, listen to me, coping mechanisms. I want you to see, do you identify this in your family, in yourself? Addiction becomes a coping mechanism. And they repeat this cycle as individual, and it turns to the same behaviors under stress. So guess what? When they get stressed out, when you get stressed out, you got to have a drink. You got to go spend some money. You got to pop a pill, or you eating something. And even, let me say, addiction is sex. You want to have sex to try to relieve the pain, because sex can be, and it is, an addiction. Relational dysfunction. Oh my goodness. Relational dysfunction. Relational dysfunction in a family looks like, well, the family, listen, oh, come on, you guys. I want you to listen to me. Where the family normalizes toxic relationships, such as control or an abusive dynamic. They normalize it like, oh, everybody does this. This is just right. Manipulation. Control, toxic relationships is manipulation. For instance, a parent or the family, I'm using a parent because we're talking about generation, they exhibit manipulative behaviors. And the other's child later mirrors what they see that in their own relationship. How many of you guys have been manipulated by your parents, controlled by your parents, and now what you hated, you now do in your relationship? I'm going to wait for you. I'm going to wait for you. We do it all the time. I became a big victim of that. I saw it in my relationships. I saw, I saw it that I had become manipulative to get what I want, or to control my children into doing something. And guess what? It never works. It never works. It never works. Never, never, never. Spiritual neglect. Let's talk about spiritual neglect. Now, I think this is one that we really need to talk about, because this is passed down so often in families. Spiritual neglect. You have a family lineage where faith or spiritual growth is not prioritized. Parents, neglect to teach biblical principles, and their children grow up with no foundation for moral or spiritual guidance. And what happens is they grow up with a sense of purposelessness or moral ambiguity, causing widespread across each generation. It keeps matriculating throughout the generations because they have no foundation. Whether it's in it, I use biblical principles, but any kind of moral principles. Because in any religion, you're going to find some moral, decent principles. And they mimic the Bible. I'm just going to say that they mimic what the Bible says. So generationally, I want you guys to think about these things when we talk about breaking those unseen shackles. These are shackles that, and see, the thing about unseen shackles is you don't see them so they become normal. So you walk, can you imagine walking around bound in a shackle on your feet, on your hands, on your head, in your body, and you go 40, 50, 60, 70 years and you never know that you have been shackled, that you are bound, that you cannot live in freedom and happiness because you've never identified that you have a shackle. You have a generational shackle that is keeping you bound from being the person and living the life that you want to live, because this affects every aspect of your life. In this society, depression and anxiety is running rampant because people don't know that they have shackles, generational shackles. So let's talk about some of these individual, emotional, and behavior shackles. Let's talk about through your personal experiences, because guess what? Even though you may have some family, some generational things, shackles that you don't know about, you create individual shackles also as a result of some things that has happened in your family, generationally. Fear of failure. This is one that I see all the time. Fear of failure. So and I have my notes here. So this shackle it avoids pursuing goals. I hear people say, well, I just can't get motivated. No, it's a fear of failure. They avoid pursuing goals or dreams due to fear of making mistakes, stemming from childhood where mistakes were punished harshly. Or mistakes you were talked about, you were talked down to if you made a mistake. So a fear of failure, and it also and we're going to talk about that perfectionism, because fear of failure, because those things can go into perfectionism. So a fear of failure is you avoid doing things that you can't do good, because if you fail at it, it makes you think that you're a failure, and that is just not true. Failure is the stepping stone. When you fail at something, you learn from it, and it's the stepping stone to success. I teach that all the time. You procrastinate, you give up, you feel inadequate, you have self-doubt, you're inconsistent. Then it leads to perfectionism. Perfectionism. What is perfectionism? Now, you want to do all things in decency and order. You want to do things in a perfect way, but perfectionism is constantly striving for perfection because of unrealistic expectations set by a person or a caregiver. Now, parents, I see this all the time. You do this to your children. You have these unrealistic expectations for your child. And then they grow up with a mindset of perfectionism because they feel like they can't do anything right. And this leads to depression and anxiety. Now, yes, you need to push your child to be the best that they can be within their capabilities and their mindset and their personality. But sometimes you guys are pushing them too far, and it's causing fear of failure, and it's causing them to grow up, and not even just grow up. They have anxiety now. They are depressed now. They're cutting. They're doing drugs because they have this perfectionist mindset. And what happens is the person is never satisfied. They grow up, they're never satisfied. They have experiences of burnout. They avoid taking risks for not feeling that that they can meet the standard, that it's impossible for them to meet the standards. So they live bound because they don't take the risk. They're never satisfied. No matter how good it is, they're always, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And anxiety steps in. And then they get burnt out, or they just avoid things altogether. Let's talk about unforgiveness and bitterness. Now, this is a biggie. Unforgiveness and bitterness. Holding on to resentment from past betrayal and hurt. I talked to a person, and it was a family member, and they were holding unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment toward a person that something had happened 30 years ago when they were a child. When they were a child. Are you holding on? Are you bound by unforgiveness and bitterness? Because what happens is you isolate yourself emotionally. That's what happens. You isolate yourself emotionally, struggling to form deep connections. Come on, you guys. I know this. I'm talking to some of you. You struggle to form deep connections with people, and you foster bitterness that impact your well-being. You're always sick in your body. Unforgiveness and bitterness has been linked to sickness in your body. You're always hurting. You got something going on with your stomach. You got something going on with your heart. Your blood pressure up. Unforgiveness. You're diagnosed with cancer. Unforgiveness and bitterness. Unforgiveness and bitterness is keeping you bound. Who am I talking to? Having the victim mentality. Woo-hoo! Having the victim mentality. Now, I was married to somebody like that. They had a victim mentality. They were always the victim. They could not be accountable for their behavior. They always blame external circumstances or people. Do you have the victim mentality? You don't take accountability because you don't want to look at yourself. You blame everything else for the situation instead of taking responsibility for change. It's always somebody else's fault when you control you. It's reinforced by by neglect or negative mindsets or abandonment. When they felt neglected or they felt abandoned as growing up or as an adult, even as an adult with relationships, people can feel that. They feel powerless. This cycle makes you feel powerless, and you remain stuck in unhealthy patterns such as avoiding self-improvement. Victim mentality. You stay where you are. You don't try to improve in life. Because guess what? It's somebody else's fault, the reason that you're there. Your dog left you. Your cat left you. The wife left you. Your car broke down. Your mama died. Your daddy died. Grandma died 40 years ago, and you still stuck where you are because you have a victim mentality. Codependency. Let's talk about codependency. And I have so many I can go through, but I want to kind of go through some of these that I see every day when I work with my clients. Codependency. So let me take my time with this one, this codependency, because codependency the shackle is the experience is growing up in an environment where self-worth is tied to helping others excessively. Let me say that again. The shackle is when you grew up in an environment where self-worth, where you got your self-worth was tied to helping others at the expense of yourself. Who am I talking to? Who am I talking to? You think you help, and then what happens is you doing all this to help everybody else, going out your way when nobody asks you to. Now, nobody asks you to do this. You're doing it all yourself. Codependency. And then when they don't prioritize you, you get offended. Let me tell you the cycle is the individual prioritizes others' needs over their own, leading to emotional exhaustion, resentment, and or enabling harmful behaviors in others. You allow people to do stuff to you that's their behaviors are bad just to say, well, I'm helping. I'm going to help you out. Nobody asks you to help. That's that codependency, because you don't want to be alone. Because your self-worth is, I got to do it for somebody else, and it makes you feel important. You need deliverance. You need deliverance, and you need to heal from your past hurt. Trauma-induced patterns. We talk about trauma so much that I think, the reason I want to break these things down is because, see, we use these buzzwords and we don't know really what they are. Trauma-induced patterns. What's the shackle? Someone who experiences abuse or neglect. What's abuse? Mental abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, or neglect may develop a mistrust of others or engage in self-sabotage. How many of you guys have trust issues and you always self-sabotage everything that comes in your life, every job opportunity, every relationship, because you get mad, because you have unresolved trauma, and you self-sabotage what's meant to help you move, heal, and deal, and move to the next season in your life healthy. Who I'm talking to somebody. I know that I am. I know that I am. It's repeated. This is how it looks. This is how these shackles look, or this cycle looks. It looks like you keep repeating the same toxic relationships, or you avoid intimacy altogether. Then you perpetuate being lonely, and you have unhealed emotional wounds. Unhealed emotional wounds. Yeah. This is what trauma-induced patterns. This is part of trauma. Yes, it is. Let's talk about, and this is going to be my last one because we got to wrap up a little bit. A workaholic, or avoidance of responsibility. Now, I see this a lot also. Workaholism. They work. So let's talk about this. This is a shackle. Yes, you're supposed to work. And I know for my people, if a person don't work, they don't eat, honey. That's true. But sometimes you're using work or the avoidance of responsibility. It becomes a shackle. It's overworking. Come on, let's talk. You're overworking to prove worth. Yeah. You're doing all that overtime to prove that you are worthy. And you're buying all this stuff that you don't need. You got so that you can prove to people that they're not even looking at you, that you have self-worth, that you're worthy. Or you avoid addressing personal issues. Some of you are working so you ain't got to deal with your problems, those issues. that you keep perpetuating. Some of you are doing that. And this causes a neglect in relationships. Your marriage is dissolving because you don't want to deal with the issue. So you working, buying stuff, or paying bills, thinking that's going to cover it up. It is not. You're working and doing things for your children when the only thing they want from you is your time. They don't want you to keep buying them stuff. They want your time. You neglect relationships, your personal health. You don't want to deal with your problems. You don't want to deal with your personal health. You don't want to deal with your spiritual growth. And you keep creating more stress and isolation over time. That's what workaholism and the avoiding responsibility. I want you guys to know what these things, what it looks like in your life, because it's keeping you bound. It's keeping you chained up. It's keeping you riddled in anxiety and depression. And it's preventing you from becoming the person you are purposed to be. You keep moving, you keep changing jobs, you keep getting in and out of relationships, thinking it's gonna be different, but it's you that has to change. You have to be released from the shackles. The generational impact and the individual shackles and how it impacts you. So some of these examples from the family is a parent teaches their child about their weaknesses. That vulnerability is weakness. Now, I know, depending on what generation you kind of grew up in, they teach you don't, little boys, suck it up. Little girls, suck it up. Put your good big girls' panties on. Now, sometimes you need to put your big girls' panties on. But just because you're vulnerable does not mean that's a weakness. That's a strength. That's actually a strength. And we'll talk about that a little later on. The children now adults, they struggle with emotional, listen to me, you have great sex, but because you don't understand that you have been taught being vulnerable is a weakness, you have great sex, but emotional intimacy, you struggle with that in your marriage, in your relationships. You can't connect emotionally. You cannot connect emotionally. It's a void there. You have you keep perpetuating a cycle of relational distance, and then you end up in divorce court or you end up alone because emotionally you're overlooking the problems, but you're going to come together and have sex. You're going to go have a vacation or a vacation to look good in front of everybody else, but emotionally there is no connection. Individually, these shackles look like when a person was told that they're never good enough. And they may not have been told it verbally, but they may have been shown it, that they're never good enough. So this is what happens. They avoid taking promotions at work because of fear of failure. When we talked about fear of failure, fearing that they're going to fail at everything. I'm not going to take it. And they're good at it. They're great at it. But because they have that mindset, it leads to stagnation in their career and a dissatisfaction in life. How many of you guys feel stagnant in your career and you just dissatisfied in life? If you feel that way, it's time for you to identify these shackles, these things that have been holding you down. If you don't identify it, you cannot get free from it. It's not just going to go away. It's going to get worse, or you're going to learn how to live with it, and you live a dissatisfied life. Breaking these shackles requires recognizing the patterns, healing emotional wounds, and then creating new ones. You have to recognize the patterns, heal emotionally, and then you have to do the work to create new patterns, healthy behaviors rooted in truth. We talked about the difference in a truth in the truth, and personal growth. Break the shackles. Breaking the shackles is an idiom that means to free oneself from something that was preventing or has been preventing you from doing what you want to do. What you don't understand is keeping you hostage. Do you know the unseen shackles that are keeping you hostage in your life? Thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk with Tana. If you found today's conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Let's keep this dialogue going. Follow me on Let's Talk Tana for more insights and encouragement. Remember, every step forward starts with an honest conversation. Until next time, stay grounded, stay growing, and keep talking.